Hi, Jeff here with Sarracenia Northwest, and we're on an outing today, and we've actually returned to a place that we've been before. This is the Darlingtonia Wayside, which is near the town of Florence, Oregon, and it's actually part of the Oregon State Park system. What we have here is a preserved bog of cobra plants. They have a beautiful little boardwalk that's out here. This is right off Highway 101. You can probably hear the cars behind me. And this is one of the type of habitats that cobra plants tend to grow in. Now, this being a true sphagnum bog is going to have lots of sphagnum moss here. There's a small creek going through here. It's definitely a wetland. And there's one other carnivorous plant that grows down here. Drosera rotundifolia is kind of intermingled with the plants. And then you'll see other bog associate species, particularly a low shrub and a rhododendron growing in here called trapper's tea, which is also quite common. Now, there are some things about this particular location that are a bit different and less common than many other Darlingtonia habitats. First off, this is an area where it's just sort of an opening in the forest where a creek is widened out and formed into a sphagnum bog. This location's a lot shadier throughout the day. As a matter of fact, the state parks actually comes in here and periodically cuts vegetation down so that the sun will continue to be in here, because these are definitely not full shade plants. This particular location also has a higher nutrient load. What's happening is nutrients are beginning to build up in this area, and that's evidenced by some of the other vegetation that's beginning to come into this spot. We're seeing small trees like cedars and spruce. There's other shrubs like salal beginning to come into this area, skunk cabbage, some deer ferns. All this kind of indicators that the nutrient level is rising in the soil. So this location, kind of left to its own devices, would eventually fill in, trees would begin to grow, and the cobra plants would be entirely shaded out. We can actually show you, and will in a little bit here, a location where that has happened. But before I take you there, I want to show you something really interesting. We actually visited this place a few months ago in early summer. The Darlingtonia were sending up new pitchers for the season and hadn't opened up yet. Now, the older pitchers were also dying back. This is part of the cycle for Darlingtonia. The older pitchers will die off when new pitchers pop up in the spring. So it was pretty cool coming back a few months later in the late season to see those young pitchers fully opened. So this is a location I made reference to when we were over at the Darlingtonia Wayside. This is over in the Sutton Campground in the Siuslaw National Forest. This is a very similar boardwalk like existed over there. But this is what happens when the area wasn't maintained and the trees are allowed to grow, the nutrients begin to fill in. All the interpretive signs are here, the boardwalk is still here, but there are no cobra plants here anymore, and this area is completely full shade. And so nature has kind of taken its course and the bog is filled in. There's also a possibility the hydrology change in this area. It doesn't seem as wet as the Darlingtonia habitat should be. There's still some indicator species here like the skunk cabbage and the deer ferns that like it pretty damp, but otherwise the ground here is kind of dry. So those factors together result in the elimination of this particular location. Before I take you to a third site of Darlingtonia, if you have a chance to visit the town of Florence, make sure to check out some of the cool things about this town. They have a waterfront area with lots of interesting shops and restaurants featuring lots of local seafood. Florence also has an interesting history about an exploding whale, and you can check out the link below for that. Now, if you enjoy hiking, there are many accessible trails in this area. This hiking trail we were on was moderately difficult. It was about 4 miles long, but it offered lots of quiet time away from the highway. Now, if you're into mushrooms, you can see lots popping up as we get closer to mushroom season. The trail eventually took us to a very beautiful view of Siltcoos Lake, and it's one of these lakes that has several Darlingtonia habitats that we will show you next. So where we're located right now is in another coastal bog, and this one is one that's located actually on a small lake in the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area, which is a very large expanse. Matter of fact, the Oregon Dunes are the largest coastal dune network in the United States and one of the largest in the world. in the dunes, there happens to be quite a few small lakes that form because the dunes will essentially dam up small creeks and form those lakes. Where we're at right now is on the delta of one of those creeks going into a lake, and very often sphagnum bogs will form on these deltas, and we happen to be in one of those right now. And this bog is just full of cobra plants, Darlingtonia californica, along with some other carnivores like Drosera rotundifolia, and some utricularia species as well. Some bladderworts are found out here, along with lots of bog associate species. Like right in front of me, I have some trapper's tea, which is usually associated with bogs. Now, this area is also very, very open. A lot of times people see the wayside, and because it's in a small patch of forest, there's an impression that that's kind of where these things normally grow, is in a heavily forested area. And this is far more common to find them out in the open like this. As I was mentioning, this is a true sphagnum bog. There's huge hummocks of sphagnum moss all over the place out here. It's super wet. It was really hard for us to get out here, in fact, because it's so soft and mucky out in this area, but just a completely unique habitat. We periodically will try and visit places like this so we can get a better idea what the habitats are like and what the conditions are like that Darlingtonia grow in, to be able to give you better ideas about how to grow the plants and to be successful with them, knowing the plant's tolerances, the extremes they can tolerate, what they won't. Now, I also want to mention that we never wild collect out in these places. This is just data for us to be able to better cultivate them. There's plenty of plants in cultivation. There's absolutely no reason to collect from the wild at all. And that would really detract from an absolutely stunning location like this. So some of the information that we've been able to kind of glean from visiting this bog and some others similar to it is, as you look out here across this delta, the cobra plants are only growing in areas where there are hummocks of sphagnum moss. And within those hummocks, they will send out their little stolen runners, and they come up in new locations. Plus, just like all of the pitcher plant species, they produce seed and drop seed. And Darlingtonia seed are actually carried by certain kinds of animals as well, so they get into new habitats that way. But one of the really curious things about this location is you can see them up in the sphagnum hummocks, but there are no plants down in where sort of the mucky peat is at, where there's probably more sediment from the creek. So they really have this association with the sphagnum moss. It's the same kind of with a lot of the bog associate species. They're up on the mossy areas, not so much down in kind of the mucky areas where you might see things like skunk cabbage instead in those spots. So all of this goes into us being able to revise our care guides and give you better information. One little piece of information that we found out as we were shooting our video out here in this bog is that this is actually private property. We didn't know that going into it. The owner actually stopped by and talked to us and was cool about it. But try and find out what the ownership is of a property before you go out traipsing and visiting bogland somewhere, because much of it could be private property. So we're back at the nursery with our own colony of Darlingtonia, and very much back on our own property. So, several years ago, we tried out a different method of growing them based on what we saw in the wild. So far, we've been really happy with the results. In another video, we're going to go ahead and go over some of the very interesting information about why Darlingtonia can be so finicky to grow in cultivation, why we think soil heat is a red herring, and our new recommendations for growing these plants. So make sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll also post a link down below when we release that video. Thanks for watching. We're back at the nursery with our... Give me a second.